There will be a long and perhaps at sometimes heated debate in Washington over what is next for NASA and more specifically for humans in space. And one person who's going to be at the center of the debate is our guest, along with Jonathan Karl in Washington. Jonathan?
Yes, Miles, much of that debate will be taking place at the Senate Commerce Committee. John McCain, the chairman of that committee, joins me right now. That's the committee that obviously has oversight over the space program, over NASA. Senator McCain, you're going to have hearings next week. What's your first question? Who's your first guest?
It'll obviously be Mr. O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, and we'll be, of course, asking the obvious questions about the causes of this tragedy, whether it could have been prevented or not, what factors, and there'll be a broad range of questions that will be centered on the immediate tragedy. Then we will be having hearings in the future about the future of space exploration. And let me quickly say, America is committed to space exploration. The question is how and in what fashion the future of the space station, the shuttle, unmanned space exploration, etc. And that's a policy issue that's probably overdue.
Now, NASA had a safety advisory board that's gotten much attention that warned of future danger to the space shuttle program, warned that cost cuts had really jeopardized the program, the safety of the program. And there have been conflicting reports as to whether or not members of that advisory panel were fired, or as NASA said, it simply served out their term. What's your understanding?
My understanding is that there's two different versions, and I'm sure we will reconcile that in the hearings. And by the way, on the issue of NASA budget cuts, we've looked at the budget request by the President and what Congress has appropriated over the last 6 years. That's not my committee, that's the Appropriations Committee. And they've been pretty much in line with small cuts. Meanwhile, we've had dramatic cost increases associated with the space station, from $18 billion original estimates to $24 billion estimate. So all of this needs to be sorted out, but I wouldn't immediately jump to the conclusion that we have cut back on safety, but that is a very serious issue that needs to be looked at.
Is it time to rethink the nature of the shuttle program?
I think that after a tragedy like this, everything is in play. There are two phases. One, what happened and how do you prevent reoccurrence, and then two, look at the entire policy. But that'll take some time.
Now, you've seen the quotes from Richard Blomberg, who was on that panel that looked into the safety situation. He says, "I have never been as concerned for space shuttle safety as I am right now. The current approach is planting the seeds for future danger." That was back in April 18th of last year. Was he clairvoyant? I mean, is this...
You know, whenever you hear that, you have to take them seriously. You have to take them seriously. Obviously, that'll be part of our hearing process.
Okay, well, we'll be watching. Senator McCain, thank you. I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot in the days ahead.
These are very sad, long hours at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, as well as here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, but in particular at Kennedy in Florida. The people there are charged with preparing the shuttle vehicle for launch, and so when something goes wrong, quite often the first question they ask is, was it something I missed? A poignant question indeed, as the nation mourns the loss of 7 shuttle astronauts aboard Columbia. There are also some practical considerations. Kennedy Space Center is a company town that revolves around launching space shuttles. The future of the space shuttle program is very near and dear to their hearts in so many ways. Joining us with more on that is CNN's Darren Kagan. Darren?
Miles, hello to you. I know you've heard at Johnson, and I know you've experienced this by being at Johnson and Kennedy, the sense of family at both of these space centers. I know I'm feeling it being at this one. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of feelings in light of what happened on Saturday. We've invited Patty Bell to join us right now. Her official title, Employee Assistance Program Administrator, but she and I had a chance to talk, and basically you're a mental health professional who is here to help a family that's in a lot of pain right now.
That's correct. And you had a plan, or your program had a plan that was ready to go as early as Saturday when the first news broke.
Right. We formed after the 911 incident in New York a disaster response team composed of psychologists, social workers, and mental health counselors from the community. And we've been training for the last year between critical incidents, stress debriefing, and other training pertinent to if there was a crisis out here.
So on Saturday, your first call to duty was to be there for the astronaut family if they needed any help.
That's correct. We were on standby in case they needed us.
And are you able to, I don't know if you're comfortable talking about what you're able actually to do on Saturday, or what type of people you're actually able to talk to?
We were more or less just there if we were needed. The family was going back to Johnson. So, you know, we were basically just there on standby.
All right, so the next layer of family are all the people who work on this at the center. I imagine we're talking a number of thousands of people who work out here, whether they're contract employees or actually work for the center. That is who you're here to help now. What kind of needs are you finding?
Well, we're here to express to people that a lot of the things that they might be experiencing are normal reactions to a crisis, and you know, there might be a lot of physiological symptoms that they're experiencing along with the emotional reaction. You're right, we are a tight-knit community between all the NASA centers, and especially here at Kennedy, and we're all interrelated in some way to what goes on with the launches.
We're not just talking about a death in the family, it's 7 deaths in the family, and a big part of that is the mourning and the grieving. Tomorrow there's going to be the memorial service in Houston. Friday we're getting word there's going to be another one here. How important is it for these employees to gather as a family and go through that process?
It's very important for even small groups to gather together and express what they're feeling. Along with that, the support that you experience in a group is quite important to keep the process going.
Patty Bell, thank you for the work that you do, and thanks for taking some time to
Thank
speak
you.
with us. Miles, throw it back to you. I don't know if you were able to learn that earlier, but as I said, there is going to be the memorial service tomorrow in Houston where you are, but they are putting together an entirely different service that will take place here Friday at Kennedy Space Center.
So important for people to find ways to express that grief and concern. This morning, Darren, when I came into Building 9 here, this is the building where the astronauts do a lot of their training. It's the first day back at work. Many of them just, these workers just with tears streaming down their face. It's such a challenge for them.
Absolutely. Understandable.
Yeah. Well, it's time to move on. Let's talk a little bit about the investigation. We heard just a little while ago in that news conference out of Washington that in addition to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, there is a second facility that will be set up to receive some of the debris, Carswell Air Force Base, Fort Worth, Texas. And that's it's indicative of this huge debris field. We're told it's 2,000 square miles. It's hard to get a handle on something that large, and that gives you a sense of the challenge that lies ahead as NASA tries to pull as many pieces together as it can, with the hope that there might be something very conclusive in there, something that would give them a sense of what went wrong. CNN's Mike Brooks joins us at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Mike?
Good afternoon, Miles. It's ironic, the other Air Force base that you were just speaking of is also a B-52 base, or a former B-52 base, most likely being used because of the large size of their hangars, such as here at Barksdale. Also here at Barksdale, Miles, are 2 teams that are involved in this investigation. The first is the Columbia Accident Investigation Team, being headed up by Admiral Gaiman. Now, that is the independent board that was going to look at all of the evidence and come up with their final findings. And the other one is the NASA Mishap Investigation Team. Now, that is the all-NASA team that is made up of, being run by NASA, but is made up of about 150 different people from other government agencies, such as the NTSB, FEMA, all the folks that are involved in the collection and securing of the debris. In fact, their main responsibility of that team is locating, preserving, and making sure, secure and tagging the debris before it comes here or comes to the other base. Miles?
CNN's Mike Brooks. I know there was a lot of concern about touching it. We don't want to encourage anybody to touch this stuff, but the authorities are anxious to get this moved, and apparently the Environmental Protection Agency is making it possible now to begin the process of gathering up and moving it.
Yes, they are. In fact, talking to a NASA spokesman, they said they could start bringing debris here as early as today, depending on the weather and the mode of transportation, how they want to bring it here. But again, I want to stress for our viewers that if you do find any debris strewn across your property, anywhere at all, don't touch it. It could contain toxic substance. Now, earlier today during the press conference, Bill Reedy, the NASA Associate Administrator, said that none of the debris would be hazardous from a radiological standpoint. However, it could be very, very sharp, could contain toxic residue. Now, if you do find residue or you do find debris on your property, you can still call the Johnson Space Center. They're kind of overseeing all of the debris collection, at least dispatching teams to that. That number is 281-483-3388. I also want to point out, Miles, that included in this debris is human remains. Now, we learned from a source of mine in the Federal Law Enforcement Agency that the FBI evidence response teams from Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans had the responsibility for collecting these human remains, and just yesterday, human remains started to arrive here at Barksdale Air Force Base. Well, they'll be examined by pathologists to hopefully bring some closure to some of the astronauts' families. Miles?
CNN's Mike Brooks. I've been told by my sources as well that they have been able to sort of narrow down the field where those human remains might be, which should aid in recovering those remains. It's obviously very important for the families in particular. CNN's Mike Brooks.